As America and the world celebrates the 50th anniversary of the historic mission to land humans on the surface of the moon, VOA's Kane presents this reflection of the monumental achievement through the eyes of the NASA astronauts themselves. In exclusive VOA interviews, Farabaugh gathered the men of the Apollo program to reflect on the path to the moon and what lies beyond.
Your Voice of America, New York hit.
In 1957, I was a Fulbright student in Norway, and I was out in the field gathering geological information. The only American radio I could get was Voice of America out of Algiers. And it was during one of the Willis Conover broadcasts, Jazz from A to Z, that they interrupted and announced that the then Soviet Union had launched the first artificial satellite of the Earth, which was Sputnik 1. And that's when I finally decided, well, I better start paying attention to space.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
When President Kennedy made the announcement we were planning to go to the moon and get there before the end of the decade, I really couldn't believe it. I said, no, he's just saying this thing to give us confidence, but I don't think that's possible.
No nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space.
Exceptionalism in space, being number one, being a leader, anything less than that is unacceptable to the people of this nation.
It is a very dramatic expression of what can happen if you assemble the right people, the right skills that work together as a team with the right leadership, what miracles can happen.
It was a wonderful example of organization within a large government agency.
We invested a good bit of time, effort, and human endeavors to gain that leadership with the Apollo program.
This is the Voice of America's Apollo 11 News Center.
It is burning, it's moving. The rocket is lifting off the pad. It's lifting beautifully into the sky.
The next critical point in the lunar landing flight comes in about 2 hours from now.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The space program was a positive that gave people inspiration and help about what this country was doing.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Apollo 13 was what a prepared team can do.
The team that was trained to handle emergencies like that and like many other things did their job with great credit.
I was the flight director for Apollo 17 when Gene Cernan and Jack Schmitt lifted off. We read a message up from the president that basically stated this may be the last time in this century. This was a very bittersweet time for us because we were surrendering our drive as a nation to be explorers.
Leaving the planet Earth and going forward into the universe. I think no more significant contribution has Apollo made to history.
We'll go back to the moon.
My friend Neil Armstrong thought that going back to the moon was a proper and necessary precursor to a Mars expedition.
To say that I thought it would be 50 or 60 years before Americans were back on the moon, I would not have guessed that at all.
It surprises me from the way I felt at the time that we hadn't been to Mars.
I'm a Martian. I think Mars is the next great destination.
I'm looking forward to the 50th anniversary because that can be and should be a very crucial reaffirmation time of the pathway that we charted.
For more on the Apollo 2 50th anniversary celebrations and historic landing on the moon, I'm joined by Claude Porcella, former VOA French to Africa Service Chief, who was among the journalists who covered the historic occasion. Claude, welcome to Africa 54. Welcome again. I've seen you here before, but I see you again for the first time on TV. Tell me what you remember most.
Well, first, thank you for having me. Of course, there were a lot of memorable moments, but because we are not on that much time, the thing I remember, beside the launch, which was very, very impressive, the power of Saturn V, the ground shook, you know. And I still feel in my guts, inside myself, the vibration, you know, when the ground shook and we saw the Saturn V going toward the sky, and everybody was chanting, "Go, baby, go." But the other moment that I really remember, and it stays with me, is when Neil Armstrong put his foot on the moon and pronounced his now very famous few words, little step for a man, but a giant leap for humanity. And what happened, we were about over 1,000 journalists at the time in a huge press room. And when Armstrong started to walk on the moon, there was this huge explosion of joy, you know, enthusiasm. And as you know, as journalists, we are supposed to keep a poker gambler face and not show our feelings. But at this moment, you know, we became human, if I can say, for a few seconds, few minutes, and we wanted to share the joy and the enthusiasm, not only of the American people, but of the entire world. So that's a picture that has stayed in my mind over the last 5 decades.
So what do you think that this monumental undertaking, that America took that giant leap that, you know, it hasn't even happened again since then, has had on the world, and especially now in the digital age? What should we be thinking next?
Well, like I think it's Mike Collins in a little report you showed before, who said now everybody, of course, is thinking of Mars. But I don't think I'll see it, but probably not before 2030. So now the goal is to go back to the moon, and that's what President Trump wants, you know, and he's becoming a little mad because it takes a lot of time. They are trying to build a new rocket to send the astronaut to the moon. And don't forget that since 1970s, the 70s, when the Apollo program finally ended, you know, we didn't have a launcher, you know, and we were, it's kind of humiliating, but we had to turn to the Soviets, you know, and now the Russians, and they are the one who carry the load to the space station. Mm-hmm. So of course we need a new launcher. And what we have seen, you know, after the mission, after 1972, the interest for space declined. It came back with the shuttle, and now we are back that we are talking to go back to the moon now.
Wow, Claude, thank you very much for that interesting point of view. Well, Claude Porcella is former VOA French to Africa Service Chief. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.